Your old life is ending, and something in you knows that you're drawing your energy out of a small self that was very invested in a false matrix reality. There is something in you that at the very deep intuitive level that gets this and is even preparing you for it. And I'm going to share with you 8 ways, 8 points that are going to allow you to see, wow, my intuition knew this. I was being prepared all along. You're going to identify with at least 1 or 2 of these 8 points. And by the way, I'd love to know in the comments below, did you identify with 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8? And you definitely don't need them all. But what I really want to get through to you is a sense of how amazing your intuition actually is. Because so much of what we see in the world is based on less than 1% of the visible light spectrum. Less than 1%. So we're putting an awful lot of stock in that less than 1% that our eyes can perceive. And then the brain kind of attaches to what the eyes can see, and we call that reality. But there is that 99.9% of reality, which is here in the field of energy, where we intuitively connect and experience and gain information from. And we have more access to that 99.9% now. In fact, that's the you that you're in the process of birthing into a higher reality. When I say to you, your old life is ending, yes, you will feel somewhere along the line like a door is closing, or like there is an end point, or maybe it's not even a definitive point, but just a general feeling like, oh, there's doom coming. It isn't. It just feels that way from the perspective of the small self that occupied the space that you lived in. You're going to start to expand out and take up a whole lot more space energetically as you begin to embody yourself in the higher realms. So this ascension from the 3rd to the 5th dimension, as much as it's going to take place in the blink of an eye, yes, it will. Also, it begins now. The preparation for it actually has been in place for eons. This is the culmination of a lifetime where we're bringing it all to a head, bringing it all to closure. In our lifetime, ascension will happen. A pole shift, a great solar flash, this great flash from the sun, which is going to spark the metamorphosis and the transcendence in our body that will signal the great shift of the ages. It's a very physical level shift. Our bodies were born to metamorphosize into a higher dimensional being. We just haven't seen it being done before. But when we're in this cocoon space that we're in right now, it will feel like life is suddenly very uncomfortable. Perhaps you're a little bit squashed and squeezed and pressured. And this is the uncomfortable cocoon place. But let's look, shall we, at those 8 points that I want you to use to validate your own intuitive wisdom with. So, old life is ending. It's actually a graduation. It's a graduation. It is a celebration. And here's how you know it's taking place. When frogs, point number 1, when frogs sit in the water, they start out with a nice tepid temperature, and slowly, gradually, we know this, right? We know that if you want to boil a frog, you just turn the temperature up slowly, 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 and the frog won't get out of the water. Because the frog will have the sense that nothing is happening. And that's what humanity is doing right now. Humanity's using that less than 1% of the visible light spectrum that they have available to them, and they're going, oh my God, nothing's happening. Oh, there's a bubble in the water, but still nothing is happening. And then they're going to gather their friends around because they actually need reassurance. Nothing's happening, right? There's a lot of bubbles in the water, but that doesn't mean anything. It actually means that nothing is happening. So instead of ribbit, ribbit, you hear this new chorus of nothing is happening. And then what those people start to do, who are the frogs in the proverbial water, is they start to get a little bit concerned that maybe you're actually right. Maybe all this hoo-ha that you've been talking about, like, I don't know, this 5th dimensional ascension thing, and maybe the pole shift, and maybe, I don't know, let's throw a little teaspoon of Armageddon in there and a tablespoon of the end of the world in there. And there's all of these very fearful ideas for them that they don't want to face. So what they're going to do is they're going to convince themselves and each other, and then they're going to pull out the ultimate weapon, which is to ridicule you or anyone who says, I think something's happening. I really do. I think something's happening. Those frogs are going to turn around and say, conspiracy theorist. They're going to say, you dodo, you crazy. You just get out of the water because obviously nothing is happening. Where is your scientific proof? Because our scientific proof is right here, baby. That less than 1% of the visible light spectrum, all of our science is based on that less than 1%. And we know what we're talking about, but sadly you don't. So what they're doing is they're using ridicule to make themselves feel better. And I always want you to remember that if it so happens that you land up on the wrong side of ridicule, there are those frogs that are going to stay in the water. But you, at point number 1, have either just gotten out or you got out long ago. Long ago. You knew something is happening, even if you couldn't name it, even if you didn't know what it was. You knew that something was happening in this lifetime, and that sense would have been with you for a very, very long time, probably from your early childhood, and you would have gotten over it, so to speak, and carried on with life and put it in a corner somewhere, but it kept coming back. Something's happening, bubble, bubble in the water until eventually you got out. Then, which is symbolic of saying you stopped participating in that collective agreement that is the false matrix. Which leads to point number 2. Point number 2, this is a very interesting one, because this is where you pull out of the false matrix. There were my notes. You lose your investment in the false matrix. And when you lose your investment in the false matrix, you start to be bored. You start to say things like, I don't know what the point is. This all seems kind of meaningless, pointless. You're going to feel a sense of futility with that old life. You're going to lose the excitement for the chase. That pursuit, that we were taught about at school. It's like the pursuit of your goals. You're going to get a car, remember, and a house, remember, and a picket fence, and a holiday once a year with great photographs. Whatever the chase was, the chase became dull. Just dull. And whatever word you began to use, I'm bored, or I have no excitement or motivation, or I'm apathetic, or I feel listless, or nothing excites me. However you described it, you were describing pretty much the same thing. And that is that moment of pulling out of the false matrix, but not recognizing it here. It doesn't filter up into the brain because it's not visible. It's not in that less than 1% of the visible light spectrum. It's here in the 99.9% of your inner knowing and your innate wisdom. You will naturally feel uninvested in a reality that you know is collapsing. And that's what the false matrix is in the process of doing. Point number 3. I like this one. You're going to start having thoughts about prepping, or you're going to start prepping, one of those two things. And some people will hold a little bit of a fear resonance around prepping. And if you do, I really want you to work on letting go of that fear before you even take any action, because taking action from fear is really just cementing fear into place. So prepping is this notion that something, maybe cataclysmic, is happening at the planetary level. And interestingly enough, you're not alone. Isn't it interesting how so many billionaires, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, are creating these underground bunkers for themselves? Why would there be such a need for so many underground bunkers? It seems that they've all got the same intuitive sense. No, I don't think that in those cases that it's an intuitive sense. I feel like they know something that is purposefully withheld from the average Joe on the street for a very good reason. We'll talk about that as we go through the rest of these 8 points. Suffice to say, there's a desire to want to prep, as in what will happen? You've probably asked yourself this question. What will happen if I turn on my lights and there's no electricity, or I switch on my tap and there's no water, and I go to the shop and there's no food on the shelves, and it's not a shortage. It's not going to come back again. There's something in you that entertains that possibility. Perhaps you try to talk yourself out of it, but it's going to keep resurging all the time. I should be prepping, or if I am prepping, have I prepped enough? And where does this come from? This comes from an innate knowing that we're headed for a pole shift. We're headed for some massive, absolutely massive planetary changes. And we're headed for a great solar flash. Now, I'm not going to go into the dynamics today of what does this mean, the pole shift, the solar flash. If you want me to do a separate video on it, I will. Let's just say that massive earth changes are coming, and something in you absolutely, unequivocally knows that you need to be in preparation for it. Discernment. Discernment, I love the word, and a lot of people use it, but don't fully get what it is. Discernment, which is ultimately having dominion over your own thoughts. We've lived in a false matrix. And in the false matrix, which was a mental realm, we had a lot of interference in our thoughts, a lot of infiltration of our thoughts. So thoughts that you thought were your own didn't necessarily originate with you. And this applies to you if, and this is going to be a lot of relief for a lot of people, you've ever had thoughts that you think, God, who would think such things? Maybe they are very perverse thoughts, or very aggressive thoughts, or thoughts that are so contrary to love, so contrary to who you think you are. And because the thoughts originate in your mind with your voice, you think, well, I must be the originator of these thoughts, without ever thinking, wait a minute, I've lived in a false matrix, which is a mental realm, and I was bombarded by frequencies that kept me essentially imprisoned in a frequency net that I couldn't move beyond. And it imposed these frequencies into my reality so that they were posing as my nature, but they never were. For example, our nature is not lack. Our nature is not division. Our nature is not hatred. These are not natural states of being for the human being. These are imposed. And a lot of our thoughts were imposed. Some people have this with music. A lot of people have said to me, and I've even had this before, there's a song playing in my head that I didn't even ask for. There's a song playing in my head, and it just, it just arrived there. Whether it's a song or more likely thoughts that are taking place inside your head, discernment is when you have control over your mental faculties again, so you can think for yourself. When the false matrix thinks for you, it feeds you impulses. It feeds you a rhythm, an energetic rhythm that you become answerable to, and you think that that rhythm originated with you, but it didn't. It was a product of, or a result of, the field that you lived in. Now, in my online community, the Plasma Light Tribe, we from time to time do these amazing calls called entity clearing calls. We meet once a week, but the entity clearing calls are really powerful meetings where we get to discharge those old programs that have been harbored within us and living rent-free inside of us. And we begin to recognize that so many of those thoughts aren't really our own. We begin to recognize that. So if you want support working through the clearing of that kind of imprint, then there is certainly multiple levels of support available for you. Discernment is so much more than making your own mind up. Yes, there is a level of discernment where you're going to look at your friends or your family or people that you know, and you're going to look at them regurgitating news headlines as if they are CNN. They're going to be like news broadcasters for CNN, using the same talking points that CNN or mainstream media uses. And you're going to think, my God, how do you not see how brainwashed you are? They don't, because that's the nature of being brainwashed. They literally can't see it, but you can. That's the beginning of discernment. And then it's not just that you start to think for yourself, it's that you start to take control of, and therefore you start to take your power back from the false matrix. And instead of having it impose thoughts into you, you begin to think with a different clarity, and you begin to think with a different level of creative power. And that's when your world begins to shift into a very high frequency state. So discernment is one word that describes a whole lot of things that have to do with regaining mental dominion, power over your mental faculties, power inside the mental realm specifically. Then we get sovereignty, and that is point number 5. Sovereignty is where you have dominion over your energetic field. So discernment, dominion over the mental faculties or the mental realm, whereas sovereignty is this. It is when you gain power, control, dominion, autonomy, authority over your energy field. I love the question. I asked a group of people the other day, what is sovereignty? And the answers ranged from something I need, to something I want, to something very important, to something the government needs to give me, to something that has to do with the government having too much power and me needing some of that, or there's a bit of confusion. And it's interesting that sovereignty is a word that we use and bandy about as if we know the meaning of it and as if everyone understands. Like it's a sight word. You can just see the word sovereignty, say the word sovereignty, and you understand the depth of it. No. Sovereignty is way deeper than that single word can ever qualify. Sovereignty is when you begin to have, yes, a sense of freedom inside your own field. It's also when you stop fighting against the false matrix and start actually connecting with the divine matrix that already lives within you at the energetic realm that you didn't have access to before. So it is not when you wait for somebody to give you your power back. It is when you take your power back. And it's also knowing where to go to get your power back. I love this level of work. This is my calling, you guys. The energetic work. I do love what I do here with you on YouTube. I love to give you this information. It's empowering information, and I hope it's making you feel like, oh my God, I knew a whole lot more than I thought that I did, and my life is starting to make a whole lot more sense. It's very rewarding for me to be able to share that with you, but to be able to share the energy work. That's the ultimate thrill for me. And sovereignty is not a thought, it's an energetic state of being, and at the foundation of it is personal responsibility, because if you don't master your energy field, you will be mastered. If you don't take your power, someone's going to have power over you. How do you know though that you want sovereignty? There's the chorus of dogs. It's like, it's video time. So of course they're going to have their barking cacophony now. How do you know though that you want sovereignty? Do you wake up one day and go, hey, I want sovereignty? Because I'm saying to you, this is the 5th point in how you know that your old life is ending. But no, you don't wake up saying, well, necessarily saying, I want to be more sovereign. Instead, you wake up one day saying, you know, I'm in this relationship with a brother, a mother, a sister, a lover, a friend, a boss, the IRS, whoever it is. You're going to say, I'm in this relationship that I don't like because this person has got more control over me than I want them to have. They've got power over me and it's making me feel very stifled and I don't like it. That's how you know that you're on the brink of sovereignty. It's like, that's the calling card. When you feel that someone's got too much say in your life or that you've got too little, the two normally go hand in hand, that's when there's a calling for your power back to have mastery over your energy field again, right? Point number 6. We got 8 points, so there's 3 left. Point number 6 is the desire for silence. Have you felt this one? It's like there's so much chaos out there in the world, but every now and then you just have nothing to say and you kind of like it. Every now and then you feel like it's a little bit of a luxurious state to be in, like a little bit of a spoil when you just afford yourself that depth of stillness or depth of silence. It's like, I don't want to go out there in the busyness, in the frenetic, chaotic, panic-stricken world, that you'll begin to see the false matrix as you'll begin to see the world that you once called normal as abnormally loud. And it's like energetically loud. And you're going to feel relief from that bombardment when you just get very still. You're going to start to crave more stillness, crave more silence. You're going to find peace there. Point number 7, the tingle. Point number 7 is, it's this. It's when you go, oh my God, it's happening. For reals. It's like there's a moment of reality when it hits you and you go, this is really happening in my lifetime. Ascension. The greatest shift at the physical level where my physical body is going to move from its third dimensional state that I recognize it in now into its fifth dimensional expression. And by the way, the fifth dimensional expression of your body is exquisitely vital and beautiful and healthy and strong. And it's like a younger, renewed version of you. Let's put it this way. Imagine if you could see yourself as a cosmic being. Imagine if you could see the divinity echoing, rippling, oozing out of your cells, kind of like you're witnessing an angelic being, just without the wings perhaps. Imagine the look of divinity in that being's face and then realizing, oh my gosh, that being looks a little bit like me. That's your fifth dimensional self. That's what we're in the process of becoming. And the tingle is every now and then, oh my God, it's real. It's actually happening. And sometimes we get very cynical and jaded and we think, like the frogs in the water, we think nothing's happening. And then we get the tingle, the great thrill, the ridiculous excitement of recognition, because we can feel, not we think, we feel within us an elevating timeline, a shift in consciousness. We feel the evolution of this great awakening taking place, and we get those glimmers, just a little glimmer every now and then of the fifth dimensional Eden that we are returning to. Here's point number 8. Less of an investment in the old story of the old self, less association with the old self. So what I mean by that is there's an old self, which is you, which is what your memory conjures. And there's nothing wrong with your memory. For example, I can remember me at 7 and 6 and almost like I'm looking at a photograph, right? I can see the photograph. But there's less of an attachment to the story that little girl held about her life. And I see that specifically with my teenage self, the 13 to 16-year-old Kerry. I can certainly see her and remember her. I don't remember every nuance about it, but I remember a lot about that phase of my life and who I was in that phase of my life. But there's less of an identity with the stories that I believed were very important and that I believed about myself at that time. And that's going to evolve. That story of who you think you are, the old identity, is going to start to fade. So I'm not saying it's going to fade completely. I'm saying it's going to start to fade. And you're going to have less and less of an investment in all of those stories, because a lot of us held stories of victimhood and we held stories about my pain, my struggle, my anxieties, my whatever it was, my turmoils, my traumas. You're going to have less and less of an association or an identification or an entanglement with those things. So I want you to let me know in the comments below how many, 1 to 8, how many did you feel were applicable to you? Go ahead and share this video with a friend if you feel like this could support them. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, do all the things, because obviously that supports more people gaining access to this information. And if you feel like that matters and that's important, make sure you've liked. That's just such a simple thing. Please do it on every video, because most videos I forget to ask you guys. And finally, from my heart, all the way into yours, I hold you right there in so much love. There is a literal world opening up to us, a literal new world that we're stepping into. Yes, the small self, the old life, the old identity, it's fading into and being absorbed into a greater identity. which is that of the cosmic self or the true self, which is a you that is vast and omnipotent and able to access that 99.9% of reality at all levels. You'll be able to understand it at the mental realm, at the heart realm, at the intuitive realm. You'll have way more dominion over the sanctuary that is your multidimensional self. And I really look forward to sharing that journey with you. So I'll be back with way more videos. Remember to also let me know in the comments below if you want me to do a video specifically on the pole shift and on the solar flash, those two amazing earth changes that we are stepping into in this lifetime. Oh la la, there's that tingle right there. So much love, you guys, so much love, and I'll speak to you really soon. Bye bye for now.